Our film begins with Claude in the high school lab, where he witnesses a couple having an intimate moment in their bedroom. The worst part is that this couple happens to be his friend's parents, who consider Claude like a son. Then, we meet Jermaine, a man in his late 40s, who works as a French teacher at a high school and spends his time grading student assignments. His wife, Jeanne, approaches him and notices his corrections, asking why he's given such low grades. Jermaine replies that all the students wrote incorrect answers. Later, Jermaine reviews one of his students' notebooks and is greatly impressed by his answers. He tells his wife that this student's name is Claude. We then see Claude visiting his friend Rafa's house to help him with math, as Claude is highly skilled in it. Here, Claude notices that Rafa's mother is mature and beautiful, his type. He liked her from the first day he saw her and began spying on her as she read a magazine. Unable to take his eyes off her, Claude then goes to Rafa's room, telling him that he's very weak in math and needs regular help to improve. Meanwhile, Jermaine tells his wife that Claude has exceptional writing abilities, and might become a famous author in the future. The next day, teacher Jermaine speaks with Claude after class, learning that his writing was about Rafa's mother and hearing his thoughts and feelings toward her. Jermaine promises him not to tell Rafa about his friend's thoughts toward his mother. When Jermaine returns home, he tells his wife that he warned Claude about his feelings toward Rafa's mother. His wife responds that Claude is mischievous and disrespectful. Later, Claude visits Rafa again, and Rafa's mother is delighted that Rafa is improving in math thanks to Claude's excellent teaching skills. While she's doing her household chores, Claude can't take his eyes off her and begins to imagine romantic thoughts about her. Meanwhile, Jeanne expresses her concern to her husband about a teenage boy having such thoughts about a woman old enough to be his mother. Jermaine disagrees, saying it's natural for young people to think this way, and that Claude is unique, because he has high writing talent. The next day at school, teacher Jermaine goes to the student records room, looking for Claude's records. He discovers that Claude's family has moved frequently due to financial difficulties, which forces them to change homes. Jermaine decides to advise him on becoming a professional writer, giving him some books to help improve his skills and encouraging him to continue writing. Afterward, Claude gives his teacher his latest story. Jermaine takes it home to read it with his wife, who is very impressed by Claude's writing abilities. In this story, Claude writes that he gave Rafa a particularly difficult math problem to occupy him for a while, giving Claude a chance to observe Rafa's mother. After leaving Rafa, Claude goes downstairs to see what Rafa's parents are doing. He begins to hear them arguing quietly from a distance. Rafa's mother then goes to her room, but she notices Claude spying on them. She asks why he's there, and he replies that he was looking at a painting on the wall. Rafa's mother isn't convinced, and later in her bedroom, Claude overhears her telling her husband that she wants to hire another math tutor for Rafa instead of Claude, which would prevent Claude from seeing her again. The next day, Claude asks his teacher Jermaine to steal the math test from the school to give Rafa the questions as review, helping him achieve a perfect score. Claude tells Jermaine that if he doesn't bring him the test, he'll stop writing. Jermaine feels anxious, knowing that if he doesn't help, Claude might abandon writing and lose his chance to become a famous author because of him. Jermaine decides to help, stealing the test for Claude, who uses it to assist Rafa. As a result, Rafa scores very high in math, increasing Claude's presence in Rafa's household, allowing him to stay close to Rafa's mother. Esther, Rafa's mother, is delighted by her son's success and shares the news with Rafa's father, who is also pleased. Rafa's father invites Claude to join them for a basketball game the next day, but Claude declines, claiming he has other obligations. The next morning, knowing that Rafa and his father are out at the game, Claude heads to Rafa's house, aware that Rafa's mother will be alone and might welcome the company. Claude knocks on the door, and Esther opens it, asking why he's there. He claims he forgot his book at their house. She lets him in, and they search for the book together. Claude stays close to her, unable to take his eyes off her. After searching in vain, Esther tells him his book isn't there because, of course, he never left it there. Claude then notices the earrings Esther is wearing and tells her that his mother had the same pair before she passed away months ago. He tells her he misses a mother's affection and asks her to give him that comfort. Esther responds that she sees him like a son, and will care for him as his mother did. She then offers him a drink, and they start talking. Claude documents everything for his teacher Jermaine. After reading what Claude wrote, Jermaine tells his wife Jeanne, who expresses her concern that Rafa's father might harm Claude if he discovers his feelings for Esther. Jermaine dismisses this, saying he doesn't think it would go that far. Later, Rafa's father invites Claude to stay over for the night, and they put him in the guest room. In the middle of the night, Claude sneaks out quietly and goes to Esther's room, watching her sleep and imagining himself in a romantic relationship with her. The next day, Rafa's father argues with Esther and leaves the house. Esther then reads a letter from Claude expressing his admiration and affection for her, with Jermaine imagining their interactions as they talk. Meanwhile, Rafa sees his mother with his friend and becomes furious, running to his room in an attempt to take his own life. Claude's story to Jermaine ends with, "It must continue." Jermaine decides not to tell his wife about Rafa's attempted suicide, as she opposed his encouragement of Claude's writing. The next day, Jermaine confirms that Rafa didn't attend class, prompting him to rush to the school receptionist to call Rafa's house and verify if he had really attempted suicide. As Claude wrote, Jermaine learns that Rafa is only sick with a fever, which explains his absence. After class, Jermaine confronts Claude about why he wrote Rafa's suicide attempt. Claude assures him that Rafa is alive, and that he only added it to make the story more realistic. Jermaine warns him against continuing in this direction, telling him that if he keeps writing about such things, he will no longer read or support his assignments. After this conversation, Claude leaves and throws his writings in the trash. Unable to resist, Jermaine retrieves and reads them. At the same time, Rafa's father is frustrated with his job, sitting angrily until Esther, his wife, comes and tells him she's pregnant, which makes him very happy. Rafa then tells his parents that Claude won't be coming over anymore, and that they should find another math tutor. Later, Jermaine finishes his work at school and, on his way home, finds a sorrowful Claude. Jermaine tells him not to return to Rafa's house again. Claude interrupts, saying he won't go back or write any more assignments for him. Claude tells Jermaine that Rafa beat him badly after discovering what had happened between him and Esther. He also confesses that he plans to force a relationship with Rafa's mother to complete the story. The next day, Claude visits Esther in her garden, returning the letter he wrote her. He tries to convince her to run away with him to live happily together, but she refuses, telling him he's too young and that he's the same age as her son, so there can be no relationship between them. She asks him to forget everything that happened. Afterward, Claude goes to Jermaine's house, looking very sad. Jeanne opens the door and tells him Jermaine isn't home. Claude replies that he knows Jermaine is not there, which is why he came at that time. We then return to Jermaine, who has been dismissed from his job after the principal discovered he had stolen the math test. Jermaine returns home, heartbroken, to find his wife, Jeanne, handing him the second part of Claude's writing. Jermaine reads that Claude described his visit to Jermaine's house during his absence, revealing to Jeanne that Jermaine had told him she was infertile, which is why they have no children. After reading this letter, Jeanne becomes distraught and starts a relationship with Claude in Jermaine's absence. After reading these details, Jermaine is enraged and begins to attack his wife. In the final scene, Jermaine sits alone, and Claude approaches him, saying he can't believe his teacher wants to speak with him after he destroyed his career and family. Claude laughs, and the film ends. If you enjoyed this movie, don't forget to like the video, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with all our latest content.